Hello everybody and good morning. I hope you're all having a wonderful day today. So today I'm going to be presenting my research project proposal. So the first step is we're going to go over the contents of this presentation. We'll start with the title of the research, then an introduction, the literature review, the methodologies that I will use for the research, the appendix, and the references. So let's get started with the title. The title of the research is Researching the Outcomes of Parental Use of Positive Psychology Practices with Children in Early Childhood to Promote a Sense of Autonomy. So let's get into the introduction of what this means. We'll start with the rationale. My rationale for this research is the parental usage of positive psychology practices, which we'll go into more depth later on in the presentation, with young children in early childhood, usually ages birth to 5, and how this may influence the parental perceptions of children's need for developing autonomy in those early childhood years. The purpose of this research is to uncover the need for further discussion and promotion by educators of positive psychology practices. As we know, we use a lot of these strategies already in the early childhood and education care setting, but let's see through the research if further promotion needs to be done for this need for children in other settings as well by their primary caregivers. The research finds that 3 psychological needs are necessary for people to attain in order to further develop, which are their autonomy, their competence, and their relatedness. So adults are able to meet children's needs through a variety of different strategies, not just positive psychology, but much of these are associated with purposeful, positive interactions with the children. These nurturing interactions are reciprocal and foster learning with children and babies and supports their sense of being, belonging, and becoming. When these parents are responsive with their children in these interactions, the children's need for positive and trusted primary caregiver is fulfilled. Now, some of these strategies, such as offering children positive choices in their play and daily routine, help support their sense of autonomy. And gaining a strong sense of autonomy in these crucial early years sets the stage for the children to exercise positive habits for learning and growing throughout their entire lives. Positive psychology development that establishes trust between caregiver and child contributes towards the child's forming secure attachments and thus creating a strong foundation for other areas of development. If a positive learning environment is created, either it's the educational and care setting or at home, through adult implemented verbal encouragement, feedback, attention, and a clear, genuine understanding for the child's efforts to communicate with the adult, then children will be better supported in attaining pro-social skills and behaviors. Moving on, we'll go into some of the government related rationale, would be support from the National Quality Framework, the NQF, which identifies the need for positive relationships as an important practice to provide for children. There's also the NQF setting the standard for quality early childhood education that includes respectful engagement in children's play, and it also takes into consideration their social and emotional competence. Moving forward, the Early Years Learning Framework also underlines this notion with an explanation to achieve the learning outcome 1 for children to develop a strong sense of its identity through educator-implemented strategies and strengthening their relationships and bonds with other children. The research also acknowledges the implications established by government legislations as well as relevant to early childhood literature that we'll go into in the literature review for educators and adults to support young children in their psychosocial development through positive and nurturing interactions, and intends to further investigate the influence of positive parental engagement to extend upon young children's overall cognitive development. This emphasis on developing a sense of autonomy as well. Parents' perceptions towards these use of positive psychology practices will be analyzed through the research to uncover the need for educators to more strongly promote and discuss and initiate conversations with parents about how to use these practices at home. So we'll go over now the outline and characteristics of the research. The research approach will be a mixed methods approach. The philosophical worldview is constructivist. Whether it is deductive or inductive, we are going with inductive reasoning, and the underpinning theory is the transformative paradigm theory. The paradigm we're using is interpretivism. The design is a convergent parallel mixed methods design. The methods that we use to collect data will be a questionnaire and an interview. The location of the research will be conducted in the inner west and eastern suburbs area of Sydney, Australia. The context will be done in individual family homes. The participants will be families, particularly the adults who have young children. And the sampling method is an opportunity style. Now we'll go into the research questions. The research questions aims to find the current perspectives and understandings that parents have with the value of using positive psychology practices with children, as well as any change that occurs from the use of these specific strategies. The first question is, what are parents' perspectives of children's autonomy in the early childhood years? An underlining sub-question would be, what level of value do parents place on supporting their children's developing sense of autonomy and independence? Second question that we're going to look at is, what signs do parents demonstrate to support children's growing sense of autonomy? Which practices, techniques, and strategies do these parents implement to express their support for their child's developing autonomy? And lastly, what are the outcomes from parents following the use of positive psychology practices with children in the early childhood years? Are there any changes in attitude or perceptions of how these parents feel after the use of positive psychology practices with their children? Again, we'll go into specific details of what these practices are and the strategies that the parents and participants will be using. Now we'll go into the literature review. So this literature review aims to investigate the research completed in the realm of early childhood and children's sense of autonomy and agency and its association with the use of positive parenting practices, as well as the comments of how these methods are known in contemporary day. The review includes the research surrounding the use of attachment theory in fostering a secure attachment between children and caregivers, as well as the specific practices that promote children's autonomy and positive self-concept. The strengths-based parenting approach will also be examined as a leading practice in positive parenting techniques, as well as inquiry into the perceptions of parents implementing these and similar other practices. The review additionally investigates the perceptions of early childhood professionals and their influential role in promoting and advocating for children's psychological and emotional needs. The review excludes any research that is not closely related towards the cultural context of modern-day social environments in Australia. And the sources reflect a range of different research methodologies and communities around the country, as well as multiple different perspectives, and considers the priorities and viewpoints of the children, parents, and early childhood professionals. Now, it has been researched that the formation of a secure attachment and enhanced psychological outcomes in children arises from responsive parenting practices, where the development of a strong sense of autonomy is directly supported. It is known to be important for parents to express responsive and positive support for their child's needs as they are learning to co-regulate their emotions in the early years from the actions and reactions from their caregivers. One approach to these practices would be the use of strength-based parenting, where the parents acknowledge and encourage children's unique talents and abilities, which has been to support their well-being in adolescence in the research. Interestingly, the practice of autonomy granting and responsiveness and strength-based parenting were strong contributors towards academic success as well in children, and were associated with increased perseverance. High-quality relationships between parents and children also promote the formation of positive self-concept in the early years, which then leads towards increased classroom engagement in school. The research also finds that there's a correlation beyond the preschool years and goes into the primary school years as well in their positive self-esteem, self-concept, and strong classroom levels of engagement. So it means that these positive formations of secure attachment and a strong sense of autonomy supports the child not only in the early years, but extends beyond that into the primary school years and throughout their life as well. It's known that a strong and supportive family relationship helps children strengthen their ability to cope with challenges and overcome adversities. It's also established that early childhood professionals can play a very vital role in promoting these strong considerations for children's mental health and autonomy. It is known that teachers' support for children's autonomy encourages intrinsic motivation within a child for learning and improving their self-regulation skills. Now, the overlapping findings from the research and literature review indicates a strong correlation between young children's sense of autonomy, self-concept, and agency with the use of positive parenting practices such as the strength-based approach, warmth, responsiveness, and support. Relevant to these findings are the contributing factors of how parents feel and their competence and capabilities, as well as the influence from relationships with their children's early childhood professionals. The research aims to use this finding from literature review to further investigate the effectiveness of specific positive parenting strategies with strong consideration towards the attitudes of parents towards themselves and their children when introducing these practices in their everyday lives, as well as how these attitudes may change through the course of the research. Next, we'll move into the methodologies of the research. So we'll look into the ethical considerations first before we start going to the research. Now, in accordance with the Code of Ethics and Teaching Standards, the CROC and the Privacy Act, the TAFE Privacy Policy, there's a high standard of ethical considerations that will be upheld throughout the entirety of the research project. Now, to ensure that ethical practices are always being upheld, the researcher will consider the ethical issues in all aspects of the study, including prior to the implementation, the start and beginning phases of the research, during the data collection, the data analysis, and during the reporting and sharing of the research data. The participants will have full confidentiality maintained, as the names and identifying information will not be requested, and instead each participant will be assigned a number code. Participants will hold free will to engage or not engage in the research study without any pressure or coercion to sign the consent form. Participants will be fully informed of any benefits, risks, and commitments associated with the research study. Their values, cultures, lifestyles, needs, and norms of participants will be ethically considered and always respected. The physical and psychological safety of all participants will be considered throughout the research, and the participants will be informed of their right to withdraw from the research at any time. Ongoing dialogue between the participants and the researcher will remain clear and open during the entirety of the research and thereafter. The participants will have access to the final research if they are interested, and the researcher will act objectively and hold awareness for researcher reflexivity, personal biases that may influence the research. Now let's get into the methodologies, approach, and methods. So the data collection procedure will look something like this. In the first few weeks, I'll be sending prospective participants the introduction letter, the consent form, and if they agree to engage in the research, we will schedule a 10-minute meeting with them. I'll ask each participant to complete the questionnaire and provide them with a positive psychology practice poster. And I'll explain each of these strategies and have a discussion with the participants to make sure they fully understand how to use them, when to use them, and how they are beneficial. That will ensure clear communication and dialogue is always established and maintained throughout the research with the participant. In the middle weeks, I'll check in with each participant in relation to their use with the practices and answer any questions that they have about the research or any changes that may come up. In the last few weeks of the data collection portion, I'll schedule and conduct a 10-minute follow-up interview with each parent using the semi-structured interview questions. And I will then debrief and hold clear communication with the participants about the data analysis and ensure that they are aware of their right to obtain the final research if they wish to do so. So these are the positive psychology practices that I've put into a poster to give to each of the parents. This will be given to them in the initial meeting after they complete the questionnaire, and for them to use if they wish with their children. And they're very general practices of positive psychology to promote positive speech, to promote awareness for children's strengths, to promote positive communication skills with children. And there are things just such as role modeling, having a positive mindset by things like adding humor to your day and practicing meditation. There's also positive speech that the parents can use to role model and guide children, such as, "This is a good opportunity to learn da 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 da," or "Thank you for this, I appreciate that you did that." And then using the power of yet, such as, "I don't understand this quite yet, but I'm willing to learn." Some of the communication techniques you will recognize as we use them in early childhood very often every single day with each child, which is to use active listening skills, to pause and wait and focus on the meaning of the children's expressions, and to always get down to their eye level and see the children eye to eye, slowing down your speech and using clear and concise wording. The strength-based practices are such as acknowledging children's efforts and their perseverance by things such as giving them a high five and a hug to show the body language of of recognizing their efforts and saying verbal things like, thank you for giving that a try. I can see that you're practicing, to encourage the value of the process and effort that they've put in. Another one is to rephrase things to promote a strength-based and positive approach, such as instead of saying, don't do this, don't do that, no, we can say, let's walk together, let's do this, can we practice this, in a positive tone and light. Next, I'll get into the research approach, which will be, as I said, the mixed methods approach. This is because of the use of both qualitative and quantitative data collecting methods, the questionnaire and interview, and integrating their findings to answer the research questions. In this way, the research will hold strong validity and rigor while providing sufficient data to support the research questions. Challenges that may arise would be the task to organize and analyze the two different types of data. The methods used, as I said, will be the questionnaire and the individual semi-structured interviews with each participant. The use of the questionnaire will provide the researcher with important data to help answer the research questions. What are the parents' perspectives of children's autonomy, and what signs do parents demonstrate to support children's autonomy? The use of individual interviews with each participant will support the research in answering the last question, as well as what are the outcomes from parents following the use of these positive psychology practices. Some challenges that we may see would be the two research methods and the logistics of scheduling the time and providing each participant with both the questionnaire and the interview, and as well as the process of analyzing the data and combining the two different types as well. The design of the research will be used to be a convergent parallel mixed methods, as it involves the collection of both qualitative and quantitative data, the questionnaire and semi-structured interview questions, to analyze separately. Thereafter, comparing the two sets of information to investigate any commonalities or differences. This method of data collection additionally supports the validity of the research, as it rigorously examines the information on their own as well as against one another. The challenges that may be seen from the convergent parallel mixed methods process would be the combining the data and establishing an effective conversion of the data to express and analyze. Validity and rigor will be upheld in the research through the use of the questionnaire and interview, as it increases a level of comprehension of the data. The variety of perspectives found within the participants can be seen in the diversity of the genders, ethnicities, and cultures. The researcher values in relation to the research involves an importance in supporting children's sense of autonomy, agency, and voice, as well as promoting strength-based practices and a growth mindset. Further validity in the research will be demonstrated in the systematic planning, implementation, and evaluation during each phase of the research procedure. Rigor will be demonstrated in the research through precise organization and accuracy of data collection and analyzation. Particular attention will be given towards effective communication with the participants and addressing any questions or feedback professionally and in a timely manner. Any threats to validity will be the sample size of 12 to 14 mothers and fathers, which these participants are of middle to upper middle class and reside in the inner west of eastern suburbs of Sydney, Australia. Triangulation used in the research can be found in the use of multiple data sources gained from the questionnaire and interview with each participant. In this way, validity is increased and increased comprehension of the collected data. An additional source of triangulation in the research can be found using the mixed methods research approach, a constructionist worldview, inductive reasoning, the transformative paradigm theory, interpretism, and convergent parallel mixed methods designs to characterize the study. The variables would be involved would be the independent variable of the practices for the implementation, whereas the dependent variables of the participants are their individual perspectives, and the perspectives of each participant is determined to be dependent as they are hypothesized to be influenced by the implementation of positive psychology practices. The data analyzation methods we used would be a series of tables and narratives that compare the similarities and differences seen between the participants with one another, as well as the responses of each participant's questionnaire with their own interview at the end. Anonymity will be maintained as the participant's information will be confidential, and each one will again have a number code in the beginning of the research to ensure that ethical considerations are being upheld and the privacy of each participant is fully respected. The focal points from data collection would be to compare the responses from all participants and locate any similar patterns between one another and any patterns that may arise between the questionnaire and the interview. Hypothesized patterns from the data would be the frequency and accuracy of the use of positive psychology practices from parents, which may result in a positive correlation and meaningful support and awareness for their child's autonomy. This hypothesis is supported through the literature review research, which acknowledges the overlapping findings that indicate a correlation between children's developing sense of autonomy in the early years with their parental use of positive psychology practices, such as the strength-based approach, responsiveness, warmth, and support for their psychological needs. The overarching data collection methods will be the use of the questionnaire that supports the research and providing information about the attitudes and beliefs of the parents pertaining towards the use of positive psychology practices with young children and their child's developing sense of autonomy. The questionnaire will be beneficial in providing a variety of foundational information in a concise and organized method for data analyzation. The use of a semi-structured interview supports the research as it enables the researchers to gain information about the participants without the need for direct observations. This is also logistically more achievable as semi-structured interviews allow for the freedom for it to be conducted in either face-to-face meetings, digital phone calls, video calls, or emails. Another benefit towards the use of semi-structured interview questions would be for the participants to reflect upon and recall past experiences and history that is related towards the research. And lastly, the use of semi-structured interview questions allows for the researcher to hold control of the questioning while also providing enough flexibility for the participants to express their thoughts and ideas from the open-ended questions. Now here we'll get into the appendix briefly of what I will use in the research. Would be the data collection tools. So these are the questions. This is the questionnaire for the parents. It's one page, double-sided. Some questions about the parents, and then questions about their child and their perceptions of their child. Next will be the interview questions. I'll have 6 questions that I'll be asking each of the parents related to the research questions. This is the timeline of the research in early childhood 2 for next semester. The introduction letter for the participants, and the letter of consent for the participants. And then these are the references. Thank you so much for your time in viewing my research proposal. I hope you enjoy the presentation, and I hope you have a great day. Goodbye.